Vice President Mike Pence calling out Attorney General Eric Holder for criticizing the Trump-Pence campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again." Pence quoting what Holder said right here on The Beat this week as we discussed how America can be a leader as a democracy when so many people in this nation weren't allowed to vote throughout history. There's a lot of talk about America being a leader as a democracy, quote unquote, in the 1800s when women and African Americans couldn't vote. What kind of democracy is that?
Oh, that's exactly right. And that's when I hear these things about let's make America great again. And I think to myself, well, exactly when did you think America was great? It certainly wasn't when people were enslaved. It certainly wasn't when women didn't have the right to vote. It certainly wasn't when the LGBT community was denied the rights to which it was entitled.
Holder critiquing the idea that you have to go back in time to recapture American greatness. And he said America has done great things, but that progress comes by looking ahead.
It takes us back to, I think, an American past that never, in fact, really existed. This notion of greatness. You know, America has done superb things, has done great things, and it has been a leader in, a whole range of things. But we're always a work in process. And, looking back, make America great again, is inconsistent with who we are as Americans at our best, where we look at the uncertain future, embrace it, and make it our own.
So that's what Holder told us. Now, many headlines about this interview rushed to a binary takedown where Pence seized on that. He tweeted images of great moments in history, from George Washington to World War II, to basically troll Holder, a kind of a straw man argument that maybe Eric Holder is against those things. Now, he posted a reply saying America is great. Make America great again means you think America is not great, quote. And he said, backward looking, America's at its best when we look forward, end quote. Holder seeking to have a broader conversation about greatness more than a forward slogan might encapsulate. And this, we think, is still a nuanced discussion worth having. I'm joined by Rich Benjamin, a political analyst and critic, and the author of Whitopia, where you spent a lot of time in some of the, quote, whitest communities in America trying to have these conversations.
Yeah, Ari, and while I was there, you'd hear the phrase, let's take our country back. I want to take my country back. And the question arose, take it back from what? And I think that's what Trump's Make America Great Again was signalizing, as though he could take it back in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of a dirty energy economy, and all of it.
What does it mean to you that Vice President Pence, who is presumably busy, wanted to jump on this conversation, whether he saw the interview live on The Beat or saw the discussion, the headlines I showed? He wanted to lean into this, but not necessarily to reckon with the voting rights point that Holder was making, that a democracy defined by everyone having the right to vote makes this a young democracy indeed.
He just wants to double down on the symbolism of it. It reminded me of the time Trump went to the CPAC conference, hugged the flag, and said, I will protect you. So for me, I think it's symbolic trolling that the vice president is doing without any policy substance of addressing what Eric Holder said.
I want to play President Obama, who obviously was Holder's boss and threaded some of these needles in a way that seemed to build bridges, something we desperately might be lacking right now. Take a look.
Yeah.
What greater form of patriotism is there than the belief that America is not yet finished? Their endeavors gave the entire South the chance to rise again, not by reasserting the past, but by transcending the past. That's what America is. Not stock photos or airbrushed history. We respect the past, but we don't pine for the past. We don't fear the future. We grab for it.
It's interesting that there's a reference to airbrush photos there, because that's a little bit of what exactly was happening in the Twitter trolling.
It's a lot of what was happening in the Twitter
And by a little bit, I mean a lot of it.
A lot of it. A lot of it. You know, I wish Obama had given that speech sooner than later, but in fairness to him, the context was the 50th anniversary of Selma. But it really came so late, and it was really prescient. And we couldn't have foresaw Trump's election when he gave that speech.
Is it an unhidden, sorry, not unhidden, is it a hidden or unseen rule of American politics that you have to constantly speak about reform as an appeal to greatness, rather than just acknowledging some of these things might not work well. We need to fix them.
Yeah, I think it is two things. One is you appeal to the past and you appeal to how you've come up. I was born in a log cabin and I will make things great and I identify with you. That's very nostalgic and backward looking versus I see the future. America's economy is not a zero-sum game where we're fighting each other like Game of Thrones, but like we can make this better for all of us.
Interesting. Yeah. You've given a lot of thought to these issues, including how to break through on them and not just have the trolling. So, Rich Benjamin, thanks for being on The Beat tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.